Hello and welcome everyone to the next installment of the TBC podcast, The Black Collective. I am your familiar host, Deqa Jama, in the semiotics team and in the Ipsos advisory team. And we are here with the lovely Wunmi.
Hi guys, I'm back again. I know it's been a while since you've seen me, but I'm happy to be here because it's a really big topic that's very close to my heart.
Originally, we were going to do a intersectionality episode, as you might have heard Ruben mention, but because of aligning schedules and calendars, we've moved that to October and we bring you a 3-part segment where we'll discuss media representation, specifically around blackness, and it will be a 3-part series called Shades of Visibility, Unveiling Media Representation.
So what we're talking about today, the reason why it's such a important topic to me and it's so close to my heart is because you see so many different representations of what it means to be black or what people stereotype black people to be like in the media. And I'm not just talking like newspapers and like in the news, I'm talking like in documentaries and in films and on reality TV, which has become such a huge part of what it means to represent as a black person. So this is why this topic is so important to me, because I feel like sometimes we can be like made out to be a certain type of way, and people, they do take these sometimes, well, not all the time anymore, but before they used to take these as this is the gospel truth about what black people are like. And it used to be very jarring to me when I'd be like, no, I don't know any black person that's like that, by the way. So yeah, this is really important to me.
Yeah, and echoing the same thing for me as people who frequently are working on comms, working with brands. This is a really great opportunity to really take our listeners on a journey of fully understanding not only what it is, what it looks like, how it impacts our society, our country, wherever we are, and just really understanding how these perceptions and tropes and archetypes that's
exactly what it is. It's tropes, isn't it?
And how these tropes kind of end up being cemented in our implicit thinking. And so I guess the best way to start is what is media representation and why is it so significant in shaping societal perceptions? And for me, we don't like to think of ourselves as these moldable sponges, but we really are. We walk around and you can't reject information. Like you can't not register a piece of information. If I tell you to not think of a pink elephant, you can't not think of a pink elephant. So we are constantly consuming things on billboards, visuals, language, things on the news, things necessarily that you might not objectively notice, but even language uses for different groups of people describing the same thing. And all of these things kind of cement in our minds for our brain to kind of create guardrails of what things are.
Yeah.
And when those things aren't representing reality or is only representing a very limited and one-dimensional reality, that's when it then becomes a problem and where we create problematic tropes.
For me, when I think of like media representation, I think about, you know how when a business first starts and they say, brainstorm your ideal client or you brainstorm your ideal customer, and they basically put together like a list of things that basically make up their ideal customer. That's what I think of when I think of media representation. I feel like they've taken all these buzzwords, they've taken all these things that they've researched and they've basically stuck it as a label and they've literally parceled it up, stuck a label on it, said, this is what black representation is, and then just marketed it out to the world. And I feel like it kind of impacts us both positively and negatively in a sense, because positively in the sense that people, especially now with the way music is and sport and entertainment, there's definitely a wider experience to be had about black culture and about black people. Yeah, at the same time, I think it also impacts us negatively, especially when sometimes we ourselves, we also not emphasize per se, but we kind of almost like stamp in that stereotype. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And even when if we think of just the West, right? And when I say that, I mean Europe and North America. If we think of when Black representation really became visible in media, whatever the media is, whether it's radio, TV, shows, books, whatever, at its inception, it was already rooted in problematic representations.
Seriously problematic.
I mean, we can take it back to caricature, to be honest, if we just go back to minstrels. And that was like, this is
Jim Crow.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so when we think of where it was, I would definitely say we've come a long way. But then we get to a place, I think, and I think about this quite frequently, where we're like, great, we've done so much work. But where we started off was so terrible that where we are isn't, it's something that we should be glad that we're at.
Yeah.
But it's not the time to.
I don't think it's the time to rest on our laurels.
Yes.
I think it's time for us to continue to push even harder. Because do you remember, like, let's say like the 2010s, no shade to Tyler Perry. He's a great director. He's a lovely director.
He's amazing.
But it felt like around that 2010s period, he was almost like, it was almost like his movies were very much this is who we are. Every Black stereotype you've ever heard of was in his movies.
Even though that's true.
And in hindsight, it's cringy. It's cringy.
It is, but when you think about it in a way, like, because I agree, but I've started to almost give him leeway in the sense of, and this takes us really nicely into the next part that we'll discuss around this, which is that would he have made it? Would we know who Tyler Perry is if he didn't? And the sad thing to kind of consider here is that these things are when we get a spotlight, when the story is this either rags to riches, even if it ends good, it's this like coming up on the struggle. And if we just look at the Oscars and in America,
that's Lord.
If you look at all of the Black Oscar winners and the Black nominees that didn't win, almost all of them are for characters that are amazingly played and of course deserve their Oscars, but they're always revolving around some kind of trauma or lack or kind of perseverance, rags to riches, whatever it may be, which is a valid part of the Black story. But if that's the only narrative we're telling, we end up creating a really limited and one-dimensional view. And like Denzel Washington, if we just look at him for example, all of his Oscar nominations and all of his Oscar wins, Training Day, Don Cheadle, Hotel Rwanda, Viola Davis,
Will Smith,
The Help, all of these stories are incredible stories, but when they're the only stories that make it into the cosm of shared love of art, that's when it becomes the only lens non-Black people then see.
It becomes that singular lens that people view us through, that the only good storytelling that we are capable of, that Black people are capable of doing, is anything that relies on a traumatic experience. Which is, for example, with did I tell you how upset I was that Angela Bassett didn't win the Oscar?
I think we all were.
Like, the anger is still burning within me because it just kind of felt like it was her time. And I felt like the performance that she gave, because even though her performance was based around the trauma of, you know, her son dying and everything like that, I still feel like her role made people uncomfortable in the movie. I feel like that she's a strong Black queen, that, you know, that speech that she gave at the UN about come for, you know, Wakanda.
Can you summarize it quite briefly for our listeners?
All right, yes. So basically, Angela Bassett, she did this whole scene in Wakanda Forever, the second Black Panther movie. there was this dramatic speech within the UN where people were trying to steal vibranium. And long story short, she basically told them, try and come for us just because you think we've lost our protector, and we will show you exactly what it is we can do. And it was such an amazing thing. It sent shivers down my spine. And I feel like that type of role, the role that Viola Davis did in The Woman King, it makes people very uncomfortable.
They
like,
do.
That's a bit, it's a bit jarring because it doesn't vibe with their previous experiences, their previous, this is not what I've heard about, or what I've seen Black people do. So it's made them very uncomfortable. And I'm wondering why that is.
It's when if the trauma of the story is exclusive to the Black community, then people won't have an issue with it. It's when it's confronting ways communities interact that it becomes, this is cognitive dissonance.
Oh my God. Cognitive dissonance.
And I think that takes us really well into the next part of, I think for me, the way that we even discuss and even have been discussing now and do at large, the view is very American-centric.
It is.
And I want to challenge, I guess, the American-centricity of it all. And we'll delve deeper into the UK landscape and perceptions in the next episode with our lovely Whitney. But for this one, I kind of wanted to discuss why is the dominant narrative when we speak about Blackness. And what do you think?
I'm going to be very controversial here. Do you remember our very first episode where we spoke about how for a lot of African Americans, some of them, their whole identity is rooted in the trauma and their history of slavery? There's some people that are like that. I feel like because of that, they feel like they have to be the loudest when it comes to Black representation because they've had those experiences and they have that history and they want to make, their present and the future for Black people, for Black generations going forward. They want it to be more positive. So I feel somehow in a way, please don't crucify me here. Yeah? I feel like they feel the need to be louder about it. They feel the need to be more persistent. They feel the need to be more, this is us type vibes.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors in this. One, I think, is, even though we don't like to admit it, the pinnacle of our shared media understanding really is Hollywood when it comes to the West.
Pretty much.
Right? And Hollywood is where?
Although to be fair, I have found that recently it's very much becoming, what with the slew of British Black actors that have been going over there, it's kind of shifted a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of it's the understanding of how Black people feel has.
But even then, I don't think that takes Britishness and British discourse over there. I think they go to join what feels like a more accepting creative scene because. I mean, in America, you have places like Atlanta, which is an affluent black area. Yeah. You have places to go as an affluent Black person in America. And
do you feel like we don't have those here?
We don't. There isn't, like...
I think in terms of creativity, I would have to disagree with you. I think in terms of creativity that we do have a space here, but I think it's just not as well established.
The space is almost this unseen sphere that includes the digital space. By we don't have a space, I mean an actual place that you're like, okay, this is where I'll go to find people in this industry.
But here's my thing, yeah. If there isn't a space, if people feel there's no space and that's been identified that there's no space, why not just create one? It literally just comes down to that at the end of the day. It comes down to that. If there isn't a space, make one for yourself because that's
I'm going to challenge you there and say you're being unfair.
Challenge me all you like.
Because I think that has been attempted multiple times in the UK. No, Clark. We're not gonna go in too deep on that one. But I mean, if we look at what kidulthood and adulthood and all of these things were doing, it was trying to create a space. But it stayed a space that was very, even when it was mainstream, it was like on the outskirts. It was like, it wasn't mainstream per se, you know? And I would say the only person who I can say has probably broke the mold is Michaela Cole.
Not just Michaela Cole.
Who else?
Letitia Wright.
But the thing is, Letitia Wright is a bit, I love her and I think she's made a great space for herself. Great space for herself. But I would say she's what I just said a second ago. She's kind of absorbed herself and is continuing. It's like she's almost in transition to be part of the US landscape. So Michaela Cole for me is very different because she's very British. She's very British in her storytelling. She's very British in what she picks. She's very British where she shows up, even if she's in America. And I think, there's not enough of Michaela Coles. I mean, there's only one Michaela Cole.
But I feel like, I can't think of anyone else. I feel like that also comes down to the fact that the UK in general is not really investing in the creative arts like that. Like you see a lot of like singers when I think of like when I think about the amount of singers that have gone over to the US purely because they felt like their record companies here they just weren't promoting them enough, or they weren't developing them enough. Like LMA's gone over to the US. Georgia Smith, she's also gone over to the US because they felt like they were not being developed enough here in the UK. They weren't being invested in, and part of that's down to the public, but part of that is also down to the fact that the creative landscape here in the UK, I feel, is just not invested in enough.
Honestly, I think, because earlier I was saying there's a few factors. I think another one is as well just national cultural differences. I think if you consider the US and the UK, this is a very broad generalization, but America's generally louder, generally more...
They've been louder since the 1970s, please.
Yeah. So wouldn't that also extend to the Black communities within these spaces, the Englishness in us here versus the Americanness in them over there?
But I feel like the American... Now there's this generalization that American Blackness is global Blackness in a way, if that makes sense. So I had the opportunity to go to Dubai a couple of years ago, and it was kind of jarring to see how they thought Black people would act, regardless of whether they were from the US, the UK, Africa, whatever. They all assumed that we were going to act like Black represents the way we've been.
What they've
basically
internalized from Hollywood.
Do you know how many people have asked me if I like watermelon? I don't like watermelon. Okay, I'm actually sensitive to it. It makes my mouth itch. No, it's just it's not working for me.
I think this is probably a good time to then say, let's explore, I guess, the consequences of these limited narratives. And I guess think about, what are these consequences? And
I feel like
how could we
it's hindered us in so many ways. It's definitely hindered us. This not necessarily the Black struggle narrative in media that they like to perpetuate. I think the way that we're being I'd say right now, the way we are represented in the media on a good day, it's like there's always something or another going on. On a bad day, it's worse.
Yeah.
Like, for example, let's take the whole narrative of Black people aren't really that, they're not really concerned about mental health, yeah? Let's take that. Like, this very, it's not something that they talk about in the community. When the whole Kanye West situation happened, and we could clearly tell that
he was unwell.
He was unwell. He needed someone to reach out to him and say, how can we help you? It felt like the media was very much every single thing that he was doing, every single minute that he did something or said something, they took it and it became worldwide news. And that's what people knew Kanye for. They didn't, at that point, it became more, we know Kanye for his mental health episodes and his outbursts more than we know Kanye for his fashion, or we know Kanye for his music.
Yeah.
When was the last time anybody mentioned Kanye West and music in the same?
But with Kanye, I think it's he's done what he's done.
I feel like I could name...
I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of the ways that he's been discussed, but where I find it an issue is there have been people who didn't look like him who have done similar things and haven't been held to account at this at the same level. And it's just, for me,
it's almost in a way that it's almost in a way like the media representation puts us on a pedestal only because they want us to fall that much more, that when we do fall, it feels so much more satisfying.
I think a lot of this is based in the implicit, right? And like our subconscious drivers. And again, media representation is so key in building that, because we're just absorbing stimulus everywhere we go. And
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's all negative. There's been so many ways where not exactly the way we're represented in media, but our culture, the way it's represented in the media, it's had so many lovely effects. You can see it in music, in people's art, in the way they take on our culture. There is a Japanese dance hall culture. Did you know that?
It's so amazing.
Cool. It's so amazing. And it's things like that give me joy, that, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's not just like the more ambiguous or the more negative connotations of Black representation in the media that are being picked up on. But it can be frustrating when it's the negative ones that are highlighted the most. That's what it is for me.
I think, again, I'm going to keep being devil's advocate here.
Go on then.
Which is, okay, no representation before. We then built a space where we could tell the real stories, which, again, are usually rooted in trauma. But I think the negative part of it is when we look at, I guess, established people, again, let's go back to Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
You get to a place where the stories that you end up telling and the things that you build that represent things really well don't get the recognition.
Yeah.
Whereas the things that do borrow on those things, even though they're still holistically a great piece of work, are the ones that get the recognition. So I think the negative element is that a lot of liberating work of actors gets overlooked in favor of their stories where they have trauma in the forefront. And I think it's just based in what we find comfortable in society. And I think, do you remember that movie Boomerang? There was articles written about, like, Boomerang is, such a strange world. There's not a white person in sight. And, the boss and the bin man and the janitor and like all of the different dimensions of characters, most of them were black. And when David Letterman asked Eddie Murphy, like, why is that the case? And he said, we don't walk into all white movies and say,
why is there no black people?
Why is there no black person? And even if we do, and there is black people, it's like, oh, any representation is something that you should be happy with.
Oh no, you see, that's what I disagree with.
It's like the silent pushing of any representation is better than no representation. Even if it's not good enough, it's better than before. So
you see, I disagree with that. If I'm going to be represented, I want to be represented correctly. That's the way I feel like it is. Don't represent.
Oh, absolutely. I was just painting what the reality looks like.
It
wasn't what I want, guys.
For me, it's always been that frustration of, if a black woman is represented in media, so let's not say media now. Let's get a little bit more specific. If a black woman is represented in TV, in film, let's say anything entertainment wise, yeah, she's represented one of two ways, yeah. She's represented as a cold, independent, highly successful woman who cannot get a man, or she's represented as the done dirty by baby mama who doesn't have a great job or has no job whatsoever, and she's just struggling to get by. There's no in between.
Yeah.
There is never any in between in those two. And it's the same thing with the guys. It's the same thing with the guys as well. Like, it doesn't take that much to sit down with, because when you do these type of like shows and you do these type of films and whatnot, you sit down and you do your research, right? Same way we do research here about everything basically. You sit down and you do your research. It does not take that much to reach out to. You have consultants for different things. When you do like police procedural shows like CSI or whatnot, you have a consultant that's actually within the police or whatever that will tell you, this is how that procedure is done, this is how it's done, this is how we would do this. I don't think it takes that much to just also reach out to the Black community and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Like, what do you feel like this representation, do you feel like it's accurate? And I know accuracy doesn't always normally sell within the media, within the entertainment industry, but it is something to be appreciated that, it's just not a stereotypical Black person. This character actually caught me off guard. Like, I wasn't expecting that, because this is exactly how I would behave. It's how I would think. I don't want to be watching movies and TV shows and whatnot and be cringing like, I don't know anybody who does that.
Yeah. I think it's a thing where, for me, it's not necessarily about accurate representation, because
realistic for me.
Yeah, because accurate means there's one way of doing it, right? And all Black people are not the same.
No, but I do want realism.
Yes.
Like, what?
And more than realism, it's the idea that, like, we're used to seeing white characters in loads of different dimensions.
Yeah.
The poor person, the rich person, the smart person, the dumb person, all these sorts of things. So you don't pigeonhole people into one thing per se. But for me, it's not that I don't like the stories that we have that are one-dimensional. I think a lot of them, almost all of them, are very beautiful. It's just, it's one lens. And that takes me back again to Boomerang, which was so beautiful. And wasn't this like in the 80s or early 90s?
You are old.
And but the thing is, it was so unheard of that it was like a culture shock, like across the West.
Same thing with Black Panther as well.
To see, but even Black Panther, it was still this removed concept of a faraway place, right? Boomerang did something different, where it was in the middle of America. You have this office space where the boss, the janitor, and all of these different shades of characters are here, and it's just, you can't pick a character and say that's accurate portrayal of Blackness. They're all accurate portrayals of Blackness. And I think that's, for me, what representation means. Ending up seeing, whether it's branded comms, whether it's movies, whether it's billboards, seeing more variety, seeing more variation. And till we get to that place where we can do that.
Do you think we can get to that place though? Because let's deep it. After Boomerang, have you actually seen anything close to Boomerang come out? Be honest.
Thinking. I don't know.
The fact that you have to think that long, that means you haven't.
I don't want to say no. I don't want to say yes. I don't know. I have to think about it. But I think you may be right.
See? You haven't found anything close to it, because the mixed / I wouldn't say negative reactions, but like the mixed, almost incredulous, this is, this isn't normal. Like, I feel like it almost, in a way, like it kind of made people feel more tentative towards creating something like that again.
What do you mean?
Like what you said with about David Letterman, questioning Eddie Murphy about this is it's all Black, I feel
he didn't even mean it any type of way. It was a genuine question.
I know, but the thing is, there are going to be, I'm pretty sure there are going to be people out there that were also thinking the same thing, but they're not thinking of it in the same analytical sense as David. They're thinking of it in more of a hostile, why is it only Black people type sense.
And that really, takes us onto just the idea of media literacy, right? Like, if we go back to what is representation or media representation, I think it's very important to touch on the element of the gaze. And that discourse largely was popularized around gender and women. Big up Laura Mulvey. But when she was discussing the male gaze and how it takes ownership of storytelling, even when the stories are about women, to women, speaking about women, the lens and the eye of the camera was still male. And she talks extensively about that. Won't sit here and bore with that, but I think that was then developed further in Blackademic feminism to include the concept of what's the white gaze, because when we say the male gaze, it's not just male.
Yeah.
It's also white. And that gaze is when we see like stories like Boys in the Hood. Even when we are telling the stories, we end up telling the story through the eye that we've learned.
Yeah.
And the eye that we've learned is the white gaze. And that's the same way that when you, and that's the same way when you, Laura Mulvey speaks about it in Catherine Bigelow, there are loads of women who are in this space, who are directors, who don't even realize that they are doing it. So even the production could be wholly like led by women in leadership, but the lens would still come out as the male gaze.
Because that's what they've been taught. That's what they've been conditioned to know, that this is what sells.
And the reason why I say this is because that just shows the level of how we consume media really shapes how we behave and how we produce.
What would you say, like, for the consequences of this, for me, is that I feel there's certain places that I would not go as a Black person. Yeah.
Me too.
There's some places I would not travel to as a Black person, because I know that the stereotype, the representation of Black people there is going to work against me as opposed to for me. I went to Turkey in April, and there was genuinely lovely country, Turkey, but people were genuinely acting like they'd never seen a Black girl before. Yes, I went to a flipping waterfall and somebody asked to take a picture with me. I don't know whether she thought I was Kelly Rowland or whatever, but
I've always wanted to have one of those celebrity experiences.
You don't want to have those, because even when you go to the market, it's full on constant 24/7 staring.
No, I know. I can't wait to honestly make someone regret having approached me, but not because I'll shout at them.
Yeah.
But I will just have so much fun trolling. Like I genuinely wait for the day that someone says, "Hey, are you Beyonce?" I'll be like, "Yes, I am."
But for me, like first of all, it's a novelty and it's funny and everything. But after a while, it becomes uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. That's why I laugh.
Because I'm trying to enjoy my holiday. You're basically stressing me out. Please go away. And it's not happening. Like, even at the hotel, it was very much, ooh, a Black girl. Black girls, oh my God. Like, I had one guy, like, he was trying to Google Translate because he couldn't speak English. And it was very uncomfortable, to the point where I had to lie that my husband was up in my room and he was going to kill him if he saw him anywhere near me, type vibes. You get me? And he was like, oh, I thought Black, I've heard that Black girls are more friendly than that. They're more open than that. And I'm like, I don't know where you heard that from or who you heard that from. I feel like it very much, for me, personally speaking, it limits the places I can go, the places I feel like I can go and be comfortable. There's certain places I would definitely not solo travel to, purely because of the way Black people are represented there and the way they're acted, the way they're reacted to over there. Like, you even see all over social media, people will be like, oh, they wanted to touch my hair. And I'm like, you're allowing them to touch your hair? Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
So I have a question for you then. So you've just laid out quite a few ways, if I can paraphrase, to say that are safety guardrails, right, for yourself to navigate as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And that is, I guess, in the situation as it is now. But if you had that magic wand and you could think, like, what does alternative narratives look like? What does positive if we can even say that after this discussion, representation look like? Like what would it take for the narratives of those people that you've experienced for them to change? How would their environment in terms of media and how it looks need to change?
I feel like I feel like this can be divided into two categories. It can be divided into entertainment and then like actual news. So within media, I feel like a lot, like, don't get me wrong, a lot of the movies that were made back then, you know, they created that space for us. They basically walked so that the creators that we have now could run. But I feel like those same people who are making those movies, then they now need to look forward and say, okay, I've made these movies. During that period of time, it was, the tone was correct. It was fine to make those movies. But now in this new age, how can I now show that Black people are not necessarily this one-dimensional? Do you get what I'm saying? Same thing with singers. There's that whole conversation. I think that's even another conversation to be had. Like, I feel like they're very much perpetuating the stereotype, singers and rappers, of, you know, this is what our forebearers used to do, our elders used to do, and we're going to continue that. And that's a lot of the media that we do gobble up through music. So, for example, I can listen to Nicki Minaj fine, because I love her wordplay and her flow is great. But if you told me literally no shade to any of these rappers, because I'm sure they're fantastic, but there's certain rappers female rappers I cannot listen to anymore, because it just doesn't resonate with me anymore. In this age as well, it's like, do you not have anything else to rap about? And I'm not going to name them because Lord have mercy. It's the same thing with I feel like male rappers, they're kind of evolving a little bit more than female rappers. I feel like
that'll take us into a conversation about patriarchy and allowance for change.
But that's in terms of media. I think in terms of news, look, there's only so much that you can do there's only so many good deeds you can do to, you know, to get into the news. And it's like, after a while, it can seem kind of played out, it can seem kind of trite. But, and let's be real, the news runs on negative news. It runs on negative press. So I'm not really sure how that space can be changed. I think it kind of unfortunately falls quite largely onto the entertainment industry to kind of just kind of like make those little changes to show that, you know, this one-dimensional view that we used to bring, because we know it sells, we're not necessarily going to do that. We're going to challenge these stereotypes because, you know, we don't mind that it doesn't sell. We just want to show this is how Black, you know, media needs to change. This is how Black representation in media needs to change. Because I feel like through that, a lot of people get their influence from the entertainment industry, let's be real. And, you know,
we don't like to admit it, but that's where our perceptions come from.
And they form a lot of their opinions because of the entertainment industry. So I feel like that would definitely be a space that needs to be explored. Like, how can we now, you know, stop this one-dimensional storytelling? How can we now stop this one-dimensional view of Black people? How do we tell our own stories through through a Black person's point of view instead of through a white person's point of view? Because I know we're conditioned to, like, you know, always think of it that way, but it's like, now how do we break out of it?
I think for me, like that, all of these questions that you were saying, how do we X? For me, one of the most important things would probably be being comfortable to question what we first see as positive or good representation. So, like, I guess an example for me is there's a
Snowfall.
That would be a big discussion.
Am I wrong though? Snowfall.
Yes. And
I have another one, but I don't think you're gonna like me if I say this.
What?
MM.
What's MM?
The person. MM.
What's that?
You know what MM is.
What's that? Oh, Meghan Markle.
I love that.
I think
you weren't supposed to say it. Oh, Jesus.
So I think for me, a really good example for the purposes of this would be there's this French film called Bande de Filles, and it translates loosely, I guess, to girlhood. Yeah. And there was a coming of age film called Boyhood in America at the same time, unrelated coincidence. But this one was directed by a fantastic storyteller called Siama. And she's a white woman, strong feminist, very learned and very good at what she does. And she saw a problem when it comes to Black representation. And again, around everything that we've just said, centering around trauma, the view being very one-dimensional. But she was very focused on it from the woman's lens because, again, that's her lived reality.
Yeah.
And so having watched the film, it's definitely very liberating as a woman in terms of the gaze. The way that she's mastered the camera, the way that she's mastered the lighting, the way that she's mastered relationships between characters, very, very liberating in the space of womanhood. And she was being revered for it as being this really, like, so the story is about this young African girl in France who lives in like the banlieues, which is the ghettos, I guess. And I guess she's finding herself. Her mum's like working, doesn't really have time. She has these siblings that she's also raising. So it's just like finding herself in this world. And for me, there was loads of elements where it wasn't doing as well as it was in terms of Blackness as it was in terms of womanhood. And that's not a critique to say it's a bad film. It's a fantastic film, but from the lens of womanhood. But she sees it as this great masterpiece in terms of Blackness and womanhood. And I think the reason why I say we should challenge and question positive representation, because those are the people that are at the forefront of doing things the best. It isn't great, but we should question them because they are good, so we can get better.
Are you saying I'm allowed to question Tyler Perry?
Yes, I think we should.
Great, because quite frankly,
because the thing is, when you have something that's good compared to what it was, but compared to where we want to be is quite subpar or neutral, we owe it to ourselves to push it to be better. And that spans to even the work that we do with our clients, with brands, when we're working around comms, even when our projects don't orient around D&I. For a lot of people here, they probably don't. But even if it's not something that's costed in, or it isn't necessarily a thing the client.
Can you explain what D&I is for people that don't know what that is?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hey, there we go.
But often, if you're working in comms or brand assets or whatever you might be working on, it's an important lens to keep in your mind as a researcher, as a consultant, as an engagement manager, whatever you are. And even when you think, great, I've done some great learnings on this, challenge yourself to be like, actually, and as researchers, I don't know, this is very fun to me.
Yeah.
But to just be like, okay, let me consider this thing the baseline instead of the pinnacle, the example. If I consider this the baseline, what does better look like? And really asking ourselves, it is better, it is more positive, but is it equitable when we look at representation more broadly?
So more like, is it enough? Is that what you're thinking?
And the answer is no. But we're in a great place, being in a market research institution and being able to bring that lens into things and being able to discuss it with our peers of how they can bring it in. And we have the D&I activators group, which is fantastic and gets interesting questions.
It does.
But yeah, I think all of us, the takeaway is, I think, challenge what's good too, not what's bad. In fact, I think we should even stop focusing on the bad good, because it's detracting the conversation away from real progress. And
I feel like I do get where you're coming from with that one, because I do feel like when we focus so much on the good and we praise it so much, it kind of becomes oh, this
job done.
Yeah, we don't need to do anything more than that. We don't need to push ourselves further. We don't need to progress further. We don't need to look at what does better look like. So I definitely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and we owe it to ourselves, our clients, the world.
And not just, I don't think just the world as well. I think personally speaking, we owe it to like our younger ones, like our future generations, to show them that, we've done, this is a good job that's been done. That doesn't mean that you guys can't do better. We don't want it to be they're just satisfied and sitting on their laurels and saying, okay, they've done their bit. We can just, we can ride this wave. Don't ride the wave, like make the wave bigger.
Absolutely.
That's what I feel like.
I agree. And I think circling back to what we do, continue to challenge ourselves and our clients to produce the best work, and that includes this topic.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to say in the next episode, we'll be going in deeper in terms of the UK and going into the concept of cancel culture, what it is.
Cancel culture. I think this is going to be my favourite bit out of the whole thing, cancel culture.
It's going to be a great discussion on what it is, what it isn't, what it should have been in theory, what it is in practice. Is that useful?
No, it's not.
We'll discuss that next week. Or next month. The next one.
Next episode, yeah. So, thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate you. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you do want to ask any questions, then please just drop us a message at the Black Collective Podcast at ipsos.com. We do have that, so you can just drop any questions and we'll answer them as much as we can. If you have questions about this episode or previous episodes or something that you want us to discuss in future episodes.
And we just want to be clear, like we do this here at Ipsos because we care about it, because it's relevant to our work, and we are so open for the hard questions. There is no stupid question. There's no wrong question. This is a safe space. Yeah. Come ask us.
Yeah. We'll even answer all your controversial questions as well.
Bring them.
If we get them. If there's one thing me and Deqa know how to do, it's the controversial stuff. Thank you very much for, having a listen. We do encourage you to go back and listen to our previous episodes with our previous collective panel members as well. And we can't wait to see you next month so we can talk a little bit more about storytelling and cancel culture.
Thank you. And that's been the first installment of Shades of Visibility. Tune in for the next one.